And if everything works, we should be live now. And if we are, good day, good
Perfect.
morning, good afternoon to everyone
Hello,
on
everybody.
on the stream. I'm William, and welcome to today's episode of Everything Outside Code. And as usual, we're going to be talking about the business bits, technical founders, and indie creators circuit. And I can assure you today we'll be talking a bit more about content marketing, technical content, maybe not social media, but we could skew that way. And we have an amazing guest. We have my very good friend and business partner, colleague. I think we've met once in real life, but it feels like we meet every other day. But we have we
Exactly.
have Mickey on the stream today. Hi, Mickey.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I appreciate being on here. I love watching the stream on the other end, and so it's cool to be a part of it. And it's true, we have a
Yeah,
long history. It's dating back 2017, I believe,
yeah,
and that's been a fun ride, and I'm glad to continue it.
yeah. That's great. Thank you very much, Mickey, for coming on the show today. So for anyone listening, feel free to ask questions. We're going to be talking a lot about content for founders and startups and just any organization. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comment. We'll take those as we go on. And Mickey, speaking of history, how'd you get into content? What'd you do? Let's start with that. What'd you do and how did you get
So,
here?
so I call myself a content strategist because ultimately I land in content marketing and adjacent to developer relations and tech, specifically B2B SaaS companies. But I'm not an actual writer and I have no writing skills whatsoever. But I'm really good at identifying like solid pieces of content, mapping, doing content mapping and figuring out a story and kind of mapping that content along revenue lines for companies. And so prior to working in tech, I was self-employed for many years. I had a sales and marketing consulting firm, and then sure enough, I owned a moving and storage company in Texas, and it was never my calling. And my wife got an opportunity in California, and that was my when tech kind of opened up, and I landed a role at an awesome company called Cloudinary, and I spent 7 years there, kind of honing in my skills just out of like sheer need to be scrappy and like build brand awareness, and that's how you and I met, investing in
Yeah,
different communities and identifying people who also have a passion for kind of building technology and kind of building an entire ecosystem, which I think is what we did in a sense. There was a huge wave like around 2016. I started Cloudinary 2015, but in 2016 to 2017 it was like the start of this large wave of like young developers coming into a space. Tools were really hot. There's a lot of VC money flying around for other products. So it was cool to like
yeah,
really like hitch a ride on those products. Cloudinary is bootstrapped, so budgets are always you have to stretch every single dollar, which like you have to think outside the box.
yeah.
But being able to like find creative ways to hitch on to these other platforms that are rising and
Hmm.
carving out a large space for brand
Yeah,
awareness has been a lot of fun.
yeah. That's great. Speaking of like budget and Cloud9 being bootstrapped, I think that's something I respect a lot about Cloud9, being bootstrapped and eventually going on to become a unicorn. Um, at some point, that was great. And I know Cloud9 invested a lot in content. I mean, that's how we got in touch. That's how a lot of you met like a lot of people that wrote for Cloud9 2016 all the way to like 2020. Why did Cloudinary invest that heavily in content? Why should not just Cloudinary, any team invest heavily in content marketing or content in general?
So it's essentially about standing out. So like brand awareness is huge because like especially now, there's for every single challenge that arises, there's probably like 20 to 30 different solutions that are coming up. Cloudinary was a unique case where like media is a big problem and there weren't that many players to solve it. Like yes, there were like the obviously like Adobe's and things like that, companies like that,
Yeah,
but that are versatile and free for developers to use.
yeah,
Um, but ultimately, it's like finding ways to stand out because you're, especially now, like Google's changing algorithms constantly. There's a large shift on to social to promoting content on social channels, but not necessarily externally linking. And then how do you drive that back to your website and what's the relevant content? So brand awareness, I think, is one of the strongest things for startup founders to think about. You and I were chatting earlier. There are companies that you've spoken with that have started that don't necessarily have any sales team. They may be founder-led sales at that stage, but ultimately they're relying on organic content or their content strategy to really drive most of that awareness. And that stems
Yeah.
from like either the content they create internally or even engaging the community. Community, I think, is can be the success of a lot of different companies because kind of like it's a rising tide raise all ships. If you have a really
Yeah.
strong community or you invest in that, they'll start generating content for you. They'll work with you, and they'll feel like they have some sense of ownership. And then you reward them. Like obviously, you have to really invest in them, and
Hmm.
that takes a lot of time and internal resources to do. But
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it over the course of a few years.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like worth it. That's something I hear from a lot of founders, right? Is it worth it?
Mhm.
Right. There are numerous marketing options. There's ads, Facebook ads, Instagram, TikTok ads, even influencer marketing, other forms of marketing, and there's content marketing as well. Is it worth it? Right, that's the question. Um, and
Yeah.
against all these other forms of marketing, from your experience, have you seen this worth being like played out? So I know I've seen like one or two teams here and there that rely solely on content marketing to drive like all of their GTM. They have no other um, you know, other form of marketing. But I don't know what the numbers say. I don't know if on a value for effort and cost basis, if it's better. So I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think? If it's worth it?
Well, one, I wish I had an equation and I could just be like to any client or any company I work with.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, this is what this equals. But I'll go to this. So like we'll touch on years of like work and growing process and things like that. But Matthew McQueenie of
Hmm.
Conabos coined a term called influencing, which I think sums up everything. And so he and I have been having conversations to kind of like evolve what that means. But it's like combining earned media with influencer marketing. And I think it goes even beyond that to include all forms of touches. So like that's sponsored content as well, press releases, even working with content creators and incorporating them into your content strategy. So whatever articles or content that you're creating or working on, you incorporate influencers. You can incorporate content creators, things like that, in your plan, because now
Yeah.
attention spans are just at all time lows. So like before, you could write
Hmm.
a tutorial and get so many views, but then like over time, nobody reads tutorials anymore for developer products. Like
Yeah.
they're still necessary for specific things, but they're not going to be what's going to drive all that traffic. And so, how do you repurpose content into bite-sized pieces and really be able to tell a story and have it all connect together? And so
Yeah.
that term I think is really important. So that can show the value because ultimately um, you want to be able to find at any stage they are, whether it's discovery, whether they're actually in the thick of needing to solve a problem and your product is the solution, or they're
Hmm.
already a customer or a free user or whatever that may be. You want to be able to find somewhere on the content funnel or on that journey to give them exactly what they need. And so what I like to look at is
Yeah.
like if it's a founder who is an early stage founder-led sales, what are the main points of friction that they're seeing when they're trying to close a deal or on product adoption? And that's a good place to
Hmm.
start on where to generate your content.
Yeah.
That's where
Hmm.
I go.
Yeah. That does make sense. I think the term influencing and also just maximizing any piece of content you create is definitely the way to go in today's like marketing world. Um, Something I'm very curious about is this sounds like a lot. When I talk to founders, especially founders that haven't done marketing and sales in the past, they're like, where do I start? Do I just get freelancers to write something? Um, there's the popular notion with every other thing in product development that you just start and then you make it better as you go. But then you know what you want to make better. You know how you want to make it better, right? You have backlog. That's for product. But for content, you're spending money from day one to create content.
Mhm.
but you don't even know where to start. You don't know what a step two looks like. So, what's the way to start? How does anyone, how do, especially founders, how do they start with content marketing? What's the first thing they should do, and what's the next? I would say.
Well, if you're a founder,
Mhm.
I hope you have these ideas in mind already. So like first you understand who your buyers are. So like your ICP, your ideal customer profile. And it also determines on the stage that the content is. Because like, let's say you're separating between developers using your product, starting on a self-service funnel from free to paid. And then you have, let's say you have an enterprise motion. Those are two separate streams to think about. So understanding your buyers, you define your unique selling proposition. So that way, you know the messaging for that targeted audience. In terms of like content, I'm I'm a proponent of like quality over quantity. So high quality content is important, but then you think about, okay, where do you start? It's a great question. A lot of times it's just identifying on like you're a founder, what are the immediate needs and where that friction lies. So like if people don't understand the need for your product, you can start with education. It'll be a longer road if you have if you have to over educate on what your product is, but that's a start. Is it something that's already there, like it's a popular framework, or it's a database, or something that people are already using within their day to day? Then maybe it's important to invest in like not necessarily pure SEO, but have an SEO focus on um, for your content in order to stand out and get in those searches. So while the content may be more top of funnel awareness driven, because you're just trying to get seen in those Google searches. Um, so that would be a start there. But ultimately, like if it's a product for developers specifically, we're talking about technical content, just write about what the product does and how to solve things. That's always a good starting point to just start getting something on your site, and then
Mhm.
from there you can kind of build out a strategy.
Yeah. I guess if founders are presented with two options, like, hey, create content that says how, talks about how your product helps. And on the other hand, is create SEO content to rank in searches, right? And drive traffic. Is
I
there a
would
way
start
to
with the
do
product
both?
content first. There is a way to do both, but my preference is starting with the product driven content and then add SEO elements to it. So it won't necessarily rank as number one or two unless it's like something really niche and there's not a lot of search volume.
Hmm.
But ultimately, you want to be able to have the content be meaningful and solve an actual need, and there need to be takeaways from it. When you're talking about SEO, we're talking like maybe it's identifying a problem or even just like explanatory content. That's the
Hmm.
typical. I think Google algorithms are changing from like the typical what is content, even though there's still many instances out there where what is content performs best, what is XYZ, and then building a funnel from there. But whatever they do, whatever piece of content they write, um, whether it's themselves or they're working with an agency or something, they always have to think of what's the next step. That's beyond the CTAs of like sign up for free. But what's the next bit of reading? What's the next action item for them? Does it go to a different page? Do you send them to a demo? Then they're experiencing that demo. Then you repurpose that into multiple pieces of content. So you always have to have like a cluster of content for them to go to then get them closer to to purchasing decision. And so the biggest thing is like never just do a one-off piece of content. Like creativity versus
Mm.
consistency. Consistency, I go consistent all the time versus being really creative at this big thing. A big example
Yeah.
from how you and I used to work back in the early days. It's like we'd have all these one-off contents. We'd spend a week building this really cool demo with bells and whistles, and then we'd write an article
Yeah.
about it. We publish it, and then we go to the next thing that has nothing to do with that. And like
Yeah.
we slowly started to realize, okay, well, we can break this thing down by the sum of its parts. We can have multiple
Hmm.
articles. It includes different company products. Like let's say it's built on Netlify, and it uses Cloudinary for media, and it uses a
Yeah.
database from somewhere else. Write an article about all those, and then backlink them all together. And so now you're generating SEO juice for all those content, and you're linking
Yeah.
this publication with this one here. And so
Yeah.
You just have to have this bigger thought process
Yeah.
behind it.
How much of this has to be pre-planned, and how much effort has to, do you think would typically go into that? So as a founder, you're always evaluating, should I spend this time planning out what like a content map should look like, or do I have like a set of 10, 12 blog posts around the product and problems you're solving and just write it backlink to each of them and other parts of the product, and we see how those perform? Or should they spend time like figuring out which bit connects and building out some sort of like a mini web to it?
Yeah. That's why you hire professionals like Hack Mamba or content strategist. No, so
Yeah.
like obviously the founders have bigger things to worry about than generating all this content. I know it'll be necessary for a lot of them. So it's like, yes, it's important to think of these things, but then you also have to run your
Mhm.
company. You have to. A lot of founders are building their product, or they're also there. So there's a lot there.
Mhm.
That's why I really think, especially in the early days, it is good to start with an agency or have somebody who can manage that. So like a technical writing agency is what I'm talking about, similar to like Hack
Yeah.
Mamba. Because one, you have multiple clients, you have that expertise, you understand what's like how to map content, especially if you're starting off like you actually have a base level content zero day one. Um,
Hmm.
you have a lot to work from there. So one, you can see how what content's performing. You can always optimize those ones and do a copy edit, add some keywords, more backlinking, update it if it's out of date, and you'll get a little SEO
Hmm.
boost from there. And then you can also build mini funnels or like mini clusters around existing pieces of content that's there.
Yeah.
So it's worth it to have somebody that can think about that, um,
Yeah.
because it does take a lot of time and
Yeah.
there's some expertise.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
most startups just will then just write the many different blogs and then see what hits. If you are going to go that route, it's at least good to like think strategically of like what are the content themes for your company. So at least you're writing blogs around certain themes, and then have a
Yeah.
consistent posting schedule, like once, twice a week, maybe
Yeah.
3.
What's an ideal posting schedule?
For me personally, I think twice a week works best because also like you need to think about social content. Um,
Hmm.
Back in the day, it was because one SEO's Google's not going to pick it up and rank your content immediately. It could be a couple months before your content even starts to rank, but you need to act as though you have a consistent amount of traffic coming to your site.
Yeah.
An expected every Monday and Wednesday you're going to have a new blog, and
Hmm.
your customers or prospects want to learn about your product. There's that level of expectation, but the secondary nature is like the blog is in the background. It's always going to generate more traffic than product pages and feature pages, things like that. So it's great for discovery, but it's also good
Yeah.
as a content source for repurposing uh, for your industry thought leaders, for your internal thought leaders like the founders for social media,
Hmm.
or account executives. They use that to kind of repurpose for their own social brand. So it just adds
Yeah.
like an extra layer to it.
Yeah. So basically, publish content twice a week. I think the general consensus now, at least what's most common, is to publish once a week, because twice a week can be quite expensive and time consuming, especially if there isn't like a dedicated team managing
Mhm.
managing content.
Yeah, but if you are doing it once a week, what else are
Hmm.
you doing for that post? So like let's say you have a contract with, let's say you're a founder and you work with a company or you have internal writers and you're doing once a week. So that's 4 articles, or sorry, one
Hmm.
article a week or a month. How are you going to repurpose that to then extend the life of it?
Yeah.
So that singular blog, you can repurpose that one blog into about 10 to 15 different assets. So you can have a video walkthrough, you can turn it into a podcast,
Hmm.
you can have, if it's a demo, you can create a video walking through that demo, and then in the comments of of the video, link to that blog. So ultimately every single asset that you have, you should have follow-up pieces of content to kind of expand the reach of it, because nobody's going to sit. It's gone are the days where people are really going to sit and read an entire blog.
Yeah.
Like if I see large paragraphs and long paragraphs, and it's like 6, 7, 8 sentences after
Yeah.
paragraph after paragraph, I'm not reading the article. And so, I work with content for a living. So like, how can I create bite-sized pieces of content, even within the blog? How can I direct them
Mm-hmm.
to a video snippet? How can I maybe create some social content for them, an infographic or a
Yeah.
slideshow, things like that, a carousel
Yeah.
for LinkedIn, things like that.
Yeah. Huh. This makes sense. So something that's worked for us, or something that I've even found interesting, you know, doing is creating content around questions I get during sales calls, right? So they aren't like maybe problems we set out to solve. Maybe it's our opinion on how we solve a certain problem, but they answer like it's like an FAQ, but turning it into like a blog
Mm-hmm.
post, right?
Yeah, yeah.
At what point do you recommend founders create content like this? So folks with like
All the time.
limited bandwidth when?
Yeah, all the time. I think I'm in your ear a lot for like any
Yeah.
objection you get. You're like, okay, well, that's a good, for me, that's what I'm calling like a point of friction. So like in your
Hmm.
case, it was during the sales call. This is the
Hmm.
question that comes up, a piece of content, boom, fill it in right there. So when you're sending an email or after your first conversation as a founder for a product or a founder, or if you have a sales team, you have
Hmm.
follow-up content to send to them. So let's say it's these are 3 points of friction that always comes up in the sales process. Um, you have content that can support each one, and that can go down the funnel. So let's say you do have clients already. Case studies are important. You always want to have a case study. That case study that can then be repurposed and use quotes within your awareness content, or quotes in
Yeah.
there, like even in your email sends. You can have you can pull quotes from there, or the
Yeah.
results. And so it's that's why I say any point that slows down either the adoption of the product, whether it's like even the free tier, or the usage, or
Hmm.
the purchasing of it.
Yeah.
Usage goes to like, how do you include multiple people within my project? Well, if they don't know how to do that, obviously there's some UI stuff, but you can create content to walk them through that.
Hmm. That definitely does, like that makes a lot of sense. We've tried those, and I sort of enjoy writing those, right? Because
Mhm.
it's they're easy to write because they're objections you've tackled during like sales calls or in conversation with someone, and you just know you can send them to another prospect, right, that has a
Yeah.
similar objection, or you feel they may have a similar objection. Um, what's your role in all of this? So, what does being a content strategist mean? So, we've moved away from, yeah, we know content is important. We probably need help. How do you help?
So it's different in a lot of companies, but for me personally, and it's just from like how my role kind of rose up. So I oversee a lot of things. So like when I work with startups, like I'll oversee PR
Hmm.
communications as one set, SEO, the website SEO. I typically will own the corporate website as well, and then work with the social media teams to then repurpose all the content and messaging that's coming from here, repurpose it solely for like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, things like that. Because no longer you can, gone are the days where you can like use those as content repositories. The algorithms
Hmm.
don't promote your content, so you have to create fresh value-based content for those
Yeah.
channels as well. So like for PR and communications, it's the message that we want to display outwards. So that's anything that we release, we're sending that message to the world, or bylines, interviews, uh,
Yeah.
making sure that anything we do externally to kind of like CTO, like the C-level C-suite messaging matches consistently to what you find on the blog in terms of like awareness, education to conversion level content, top, middle, bottom funnel content.
Hmm.
So there's always a consistent line between all of it. Same thing with SEO. One, there's technical SEO for the website that has to be done to make sure that like you're passing all this the page speed scores, everything like that. So that way your site can actually be used. But then the actual content itself, everything has to be, you have to keep SEO in mind with everything. And then now, not just SEO, you have generative engine optimization and search generative experiences, which is a whole other set, which is like other layers to think about for each piece of content and product pages. I'm not the one
Yeah.
that owns the messaging. I'll work with content marketing, I mean, with product marketing for actual product messaging, but getting it onto the website, making sure the website has a good user experience, the story is there, so that they match the flow. And then for social media, again, I
Yeah.
mentioned repurposing all the content, but it's also about building internal brands, internal members' brands. So like if you have a sales team, so SDRs, AEs, they need to have a brand that they're experts within your product space. And so it may take a while to build trust on social media, but at least they're promoting content, they're acting as industry experts. Same thing with founders, because people buy from people and not necessarily brands. So
Yeah.
a company LinkedIn page, when you put a post, could have maybe sub 1,000 impressions, but then that founder posts either the same thing or something similar, and then you'll have like 2,000, maybe 10,000, depending on the following impressions for that. And you just engage in the comments. So I'm the person that kind of thinks about how all these things tie together, then work with sales to see like where the friction lies in the sales process and where content can support there. Working with maybe it's the self-service team or seeing for product adoption,
Yeah.
what gaps are there, and all of that. So it's a lot to
Yeah.
think about, mapping, and then
It's a
always
lot.
tweaking, repurposing, refreshing. And so
Yeah.
hopefully you have a couple good agencies or a good team to work with
Yeah.
to execute.
Yeah. That's definitely a lot to think about. So typically you do this for multiple organizations at the moment, right?
Yeah. So right now I'm doing, I have several fractional clients. And so at different stages, I either map all of it or part of it or give advice for consulting, or I work with, I help them pick different agencies and then I'll manage those agencies for them,
Hmm.
things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that you mentioned that I think we should highlight on, on this stream is the fact that, founder written content performs way better than, content written by the organization. And a lot of founders miss this. I did miss this a lot, when starting out Hackmamba was I just relied on, yeah, we're going to keep creating content. We have someone on social media
Mhm.
creating stuff, but no one engages with that. And as soon as I started writing, the funny thing was I'd write, but people would attribute that to the organization. But if the
Mhm.
organization writes, they don't see it. They don't like interact with it in any way. Is there a way to give
I
like a
won't
brand a
name drop.
face? Okay,
Yes,
say
yeah, and I'm
go
not
ahead.
gonna. I'm not gonna name drop. Sorry, my headphones cut out for a moment. I'm not gonna name drop the tool itself, but I was talking to a CEO of a really cool tool. Um,
Hmm.
he mentioned that over 90% of their inbound leads come from LinkedIn, primarily from
Wow.
him and his two AEs. And his tool helps promote the content. It's a CMS based SEO tool that also has like social
Hmm.
sharing features.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that founders and actual people get more engagement because they do the same level of spend and promotion for their corporate content. So, like, let's say they have a corporate blog post, they have
Hmm.
repurposed content for their corporate page. They'll have the same level of engagement. They'll get likes, they'll get shares, they get the company promoting it, things like that.
Hmm.
But it doesn't have as much impressions as if they were to promote the same thing. So people are always important. You want to be able to add value as much as possible, and then always have source content to go through. That's the
Yeah.
blogs that you create, the articles you create, the guides you work on, um, things like that.
Yeah.
Demos are great because they're visual and you can showcase them.
Yeah. That's super. I mean, I think if there's any takeaway from this stream anyone should take and like get as a founder is you should be creating more on your brand. Um,
Mhm.
I realize we've been talking a lot about funnels, right? We say like funnels, top of funnel, bottom funnel. I don't think like folks that listen to this stream, like listen to this
know
podcast,
what a
understand
funnel
what
is.
those what funnels are. Do you want to speak more about that? What are funnels when we
Yeah.
say it?
Yeah. So like when I say top of funnel, I think of like awareness level content. So that's like things for discovery. So you're introducing your product, your company, or the challenge that people are facing, and you provide a solution, or you're highlighting benefits, or and it's top of funnel channels are typically like generic blog, not generic's the wrong word, but blog posts, even webinars can be top of funnel when you're in the introductory phase. Middle of funnel dives a little bit more in depth. So it's I view that as like educational content. So in-depth technical content about the product and company, usually linked to that awareness level. So there's always going to be a connective thread there. Um, Use cases, some tutorials, things like that. Conversion level content or bottom of the funnel. That's when you're closest to the buying stage or the sign up stage, whatever the product is. So you're showcasing customer stories. You talk about maybe partnership programs, maybe enterprise offerings. Bottom funnel content is like product demos, sales collateral, even how-to tutorials can be in the bottom of the funnel because you're assuming that they're using your product or they're going to use your product to solve that. Where that
Yeah.
educational content is a higher level of that. You're not
Hmm.
actually going into the steps involved of doing those
Yeah.
things. And so that's typically how I'll identify top, middle, bottom on your website. Uh, on your website, top of funnel could always mention your product name. When you're doing communications and you're doing like a byline or something like that, you typically don't mention your product at all, and your company mention will be just in your byline, so your author bio.
Yeah.
And so, in that sense of top of funnel, it's just going to be these are the challenges that are in your ecosystem, and
Yeah.
technologies coming out to solve it. And you don't list yourself as a solution, but you kind of lead them towards that story. And then when they come onto your website, via your homepage or wherever they land on, that can be linked in there if the publication allows. That kind of inserts product name and then continues that story.
Yeah. That makes sense. To add to that, I sort of like quick way I see like content funnels are just content that matches the typical buyer journey from
Mhm.
when they're at an awareness stage, they're just trying to learn about the problem and potential solutions to when they are considering your product. So what content will help them consider your solution to the
Yeah,
problem, right? Now that they know your solution exists, why should they pick you? And
exactly.
then
Why
there
should they
is
care?
the last bit that is the decision making part of a buyer journey, which is they're trying to decide to buy. What reinforces that decision making process and what makes them say, hey, here's my money. And like you said, it could be sales collaterals, it could be product demos, it could be how to, tutorials that solve very specific problems that makes them say, go, oh, here's my money. I'm going to pay for this thing because I know how it works. So yeah, I think those are good. That's a good way of highlighting content funnels.
Yeah.
For all of this, what is success? Like, what is success? How do you measure success? Right? It's a
It's
question that
a
I keep
great question.
getting
Yeah.
in sales calls. I keep getting in like, especially amongst folks that don't understand the benefit of like content marketing. They haven't done it before. They're like, how do I, if I bring you Mickey on board, um, how do I know you're doing a great job?
Yeah. So the official answer, I'll get to in a moment, but the first answer, let's say you're starting from zero.
Yeah.
Success will just be getting content out there and then finding a baseline. With everything, you
Hmm.
need to figure out your KPIs. For the audience, it's key performance indicators. So, like, that's what you're
Hmm.
going to measure that success, to measure your content effectiveness. So that could be for organic traffic, be unique visitors. Maybe it's signups. Maybe you need to have a CTA for each one, depending on the type of content you're producing. So how many
Hmm.
conversions you're actually getting from it. I would never really expect conversions to be top like a one-to-one thing for every single blog, because you're not gonna build trust over a single. I mean, you can
Mm-hmm.
obviously, but it's rare that you build enough trust to get an active user to register upon the first thing. But typically, you want to start with unique visitors as your first KPI to see that it's actually getting engagement. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad piece of content, because with the Google algorithms changing, it's harder than ever for a company to rank on page one of Google with like a low domain authority, with a lower domain authority. It takes time to build that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just with all the algorithm updates, I think it's harder today than it was 5 years ago if you have an established
Yeah.
website. So then it comes to how do you actually repurpose that content, and then in those things, when you repurpose it in social, not just posting a post with a link to that blog, actually repurposing the point of the message that's in that blog in a value-based post. You measure the engagement, the impressions on those, the level of how many comments you're getting, you interact with those comments. Then later
Mm-hmm.
you can then apply the source blog to follow up for those who are interested. Then you can measure who goes from LinkedIn to those, and those are actual I forgot the term, but like that, those are valuable
Yeah.
uh, impression or valuable sessions, because essentially they're clicking straight from the link that you shared in the comment section in the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to read the
Yeah.
blog, and they're more likely to convert than an organic traffic. So it's things like that, and it all takes time and effort. But like if you have a framework,
Yeah.
like here's the blog you publish. For every blog you publish, you have like these 10 different steps of repurposing it to at least 3 of them, and you can switch it up each time to see which one gets the most
Yeah.
impressions and engagement. As long as you're extending the life of each piece of content, you can get away with
Mm-hmm.
1 blog a week, 2 blogs a month, things like that, because you have supporting content. It
Yeah.
gets much more in depth once you start to build content clusters. Typically, just to segue on content clusters for a moment, you have the theme that you're talking about, and usually, if you want to insert SEO, you have the main keyword, and then you have all the supporting keywords. Each of the supporting
Mm-hmm.
keywords have its own article. The main keyword is in this pillar post that is a
Yeah.
large summary of everything, and then in there, all these articles are linked in there. Most likely the pillar post will get ranked on Google on page one. That one, anytime
Mm-hmm.
they click on it, all those other posts, because they're backlinked to it, will get what I call SEO juice, or vice versa. Let's say one of those supporting articles in the cluster ranks and get lots of clicks. It supports all the other posts as well. So they're all linked
Yeah.
together in a cluster.
Yeah.
I think we're running out of time, so maybe AI should be a topic we quickly run down as well.
Yeah.
I
We're
think it's on
coming up on
everybody's
time.
mind.
Um. Yeah. So let's talk about AI and content. I guess that's the buzz. Some folks are
Yeah.
afraid. Everyone in all bits, like all the different parts of content marketing, are either they're either scared or they're like, "Yay, we can do our jobs better." What do you think? How do you feel
So the one
first?
thing, well, I'll give my opinion first. My opinion
Mm-hmm.
is AI for content is not a replacement; it's a tool to accelerate and enhance what you're already doing. And I say that because I had a conversation with the founder a while ago where I talked about content strategy, and I did a content mapping exercise with them and everything like that. They're like, well, why don't I just have AI write everything? You could do that, but now the algorithm's cracking down and there are changes. And so websites that did have AI written for everything last year that had a lot of traffic, their traffic fell by like 90%. I forgetting the agency now that did a whole report, but there was an SEO report on LinkedIn that came out
Yeah.
that mapped these websites. But AI is an excellent tool because you have your subject matter expert, and I'll talk enterprise as well as technical content. But let's say you have your subject matter expert; they generate an ebook for you. In the past, it would take 3-4 months to really build up an entire content library of content that's going to be launched next quarter. So you have an ebook, that ebook has the supporting blog. There's all the organic social campaigns that go along with that ebook. There's then the paid ads and all the content that goes along with that to promote. Then the ebook has 4 themes. Those 4 themes, each one of them can be a white paper. Then you repurpose that.
Yeah.
The white paper has a blog, and then all the organic social content on different channels, and then the paid content from there, and then the infographics and all these things. And you spend a lot of time actually writing all of those. So then you actually come time where it's now you launch the campaign. You don't actually have budget to promote everything, and not everything's as receptive. This white paper worked out great. You can repurpose it, then have a webinar on what does work out well, and then a webinar is repurposed into a blog. But it takes a lot of effort. Now what you can do, you still have the subject matter expert create that large asset like the ebook, and then you can use AI to talk to it and break it down by the sum of its part, and use social to kind of test messaging. So like you do polls, or you find these are the themes that you care about and you're going to write content on. But let's say all of a sudden the one that you were banking on doesn't necessarily resonate with your audience, and then they start to bring up in a conversation a different angle that you weren't even going to write about. Now with AI, you can quickly spin up an outline, and then you have your technical writers or your internal writing team or contractors or agency write the content that actually will that resonates with the audience, and then deliver that piece of content to them. And you can do that much faster. So you no longer, what used to take 3 to 4 months to turn an ebook into 42 top of funnel assets, and then 26 middle and 15 bottom of the funnel. It's too much content to even promote. Now you can really be strategic. And then there are ways, which is for a later conversation, for like one-to-one personalization, even using AI as well. But I think it's an excellent tool to use for ideation and to kind of expand on topics.
Yeah.
I don't view it as a replacement for content strategies or content writing.
Yeah, I definitely think I share the same opinion that there is a place for AI in ideation, but just in ideation, right? I see it as a lever you could pull to figure out your unknowns, so the things you do not know that you do not know, but AI knows everything. So you could just lean on that. Same way developers use it to find answers to problems that they wouldn't otherwise think about. It's the same way you could use that with content, but obviously the actual creation of the content, I think, should be written by humans. Maybe there's a world in 2 years where it can be written like humans. It would sound like humans, but it's like AI generated. I don't know what that world would look like yet, though.
I think a cool thing. Yeah, no, that's a good thing. I just lost my point there, but what's interesting is like we talked about this previously, is like you have so many countries that are taught like really proper English, and then they are content writers, and now because they were taught to write with very proper English, they're being flagged as AI when it's human generated content.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting. I think AI is a great tool, though. It's I'll say that I use it every day for ideation, but also they take that source content. What you can do in ways you can use it, if you're going to personalize content. So let's say you have the source article or source piece of content for this audience, but you're using a personalization tool. You can have this section that maybe this section actually works, or this article works for every different persona that may be using your product, but they have different use cases. So you can have a section based off of, if you have any identifying mark of who they are coming to your website, you can have that AI rewrite that section for that persona. Insert their job title or their company name or things like that. Or even on the back end, like you have 4 different versions of introduction. You've written yours, and then that rewrites that introduction. You can cycle through those. But the point is, the source material or the source is always human generated.
Yeah.
Because then it starts to get you start to see hallucinations. You start to see like a degradation in content quality. Because like I've done where I've written AI generated content and I use that as the source, and you just see it degrades over time.
Yeah, I can imagine it just like gets worse and, and worse as time
Yeah.
goes. But we're coming up on time. I would love to like talk about AI, like SEO and AI in technical content, but I guess we'll leave that for like another session. Um, Thank you so much, Mickey. How does like how does any founder find you that's looking to maximize their content efforts through like the help of the content strategist? What's the best way to find you?
LinkedIn is the best way. Mickey Aharony, and you'll see a trophy for award-winning content strategist on there. Yeah, so
Yeah.
LinkedIn, I'm there. I have a Calendly link where you can book time, where we can have a
Hmm.
30-minute discovery call, and
Yeah.
I love chatting and seeing what people's challenges are and what product challenges
Yeah.
they face and how to solve them, and it's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. That's great. I hope you get a lot of people reach out after this, and we can
And
head out
check
somewhere.
out check out my influencing article on my featured session. It's another
Yeah.
shout out to Matthew McQueenie for coining the idea. But I'm really all about influencing. It's
Okay.
attaching earned media and influencer marketing to your overall content strategy.
Yeah. So anyone listening, head out to LinkedIn, check out Mickey Aharony, and um, check out that influencing article on his profile. Anyways, thank you so much, Mickey, and for anyone else listening, thank you so much for listening and tuning in today. You can hit the subscribe button somewhere down here if you're on YouTube. And either way, we'll see you next week on another episode of Everything Outside Hood. Have a wonderful rest of the day,
Take care,
man.
everybody. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.